In this video, I want to show you guys how to create a dice game that we play against the computer. And the way it's going to work is we're going to ask the user to specify how many rounds they want to play against the computer. And then we're going to play that many rounds. We're going to roll the dice. The computer's going to roll the dice. And after X amount of rounds, we're going to have a winner. And it's going to declare the winner with a system.out.println function. So let's get into how we're going to do this. The first thing we want to do is we want to create two variables, one being the user score and one being the CPU score. These two variables are going to keep track of our scores. So what we can do is we can create a variable of the integer data type, and we can say user score. We're going to just set it to 0, at least at first. We're going to do the same thing with the CPU score. We're also set it equal to 0. Next, we want to ask the user how many rounds that we want to play against the computer. So we can do a system.out.println function. So system.out.println, and we're just going to say how many rounds. Okay, and then from here, we want to get input from the user. This input is going to be how many rounds that we're going to play against the computer. And the way we're going to do this is with some functions inside of the scanner class. As of now, right now, we don't have access to that class. So what we have to do to get access to those functions is to import the java.util.scanner class. Now that we've imported it, we have to create an object of it in order to use those functions. So what we're going to do is create an object by saying scanner is the name of the class. And we're going to call this object scan for simplicity is equal to new scanner. We're going to pass this object as parameters as system.in. So now we've imported the scanner class, created an object of the scanner class. We can now use the functions inside of those classes necessary to get user input. So we asked how many rounds. We're going to create a variable called int, and we're just going to call this variable rounds is equal to scan.nextInt. Okay. So what this function does, nextInt, that's located inside of the scanner class, is it gets user input in the form of an integer, and it's going to store it in this rounds variable that we created right here. So now we have that. What we need to do now is we need to create a for loop, and this for loop is going to create X amount of iterations, or however many iterations that the user has specified here. Each iteration is going to mimic a particular round in the game. So in order to do this, we're just going to say for int x equals 0. We're going to say x is less than rounds and x plus plus. So this is going to run 100 times, or however many times that the user specifies. If it's 100, it'll run 100 times. So now we need to get the user choice and the CPU choice. So for every iteration or every round of this dice game, we're going to get a new role from us and a new role from the computer. So we're going to create a variable of the integer data type called int, or called user choice, and we'll just say user choice, and we're going to set it equal to we can't actually pick a particular number, because if you think about how you roll a dice, you don't actually pick what you get. You just randomly get 1 through 6. So we need to pick a random number of 1 through 6, and the way we can do this is with some functions inside of the random class. So we can import that class. In order to use those functions, we need to import it. Just like the scanner class, we need to create an object of it. So we're going to say random, or the name of the class. We'll also call this object rand for simplicity, is equal to new random. This object is not going to take in any parameters. So now we've imported the random class, create an object of it. We can now use the functions inside of it that are necessary to get a random number between a specified interval. That interval is going to be 6 because we need to get a random number between 1 and 6. So we're going to say rand.nextInt 6. However, what we pass this function, this nextInt function located inside of our random class, whatever we pass to it, it goes up to but not including this number. So as of now, it's going to pick a random number between 0 and 5. In order to fix that, we can just say +1 And now it'll pick a random number between 1 and 6. So we've got our dice roll. We now need to get the CPU's dice roll, and we're going to do it the same way. We're going to create a new variable of the integer data type, and we're going to call it CPU choice. So CPU choice. We're going to set it equal to rand.nextInt. We're going to pass it 6, and we're going to say +1 for reasons earlier specified. Okay, so now we've created both of our roles. What we need to do is we need to evaluate these choices. We need to see if we got a higher integer than the CPU did. So say we got 6 and the CPU got 5, we would win that round, and we need to check. So we need to say if CPU choice is greater than user choice, what we need to do is we need to increment our CPU score. So what we're going to say is CPU score plus equals 1. So CPU score plus equals 1. And on the other hand, if the CPU choice is less than the user choice, so what we're going to say is else if CPU choice is less than user choice, all we're going to do is increment the user score plus equals 1. Okay, now if they are equal, no points will be awarded, so there's no reason to say CPU choice is equal to user choice. If they're equal, no points will be awarded, and the program will continue on. So now what we need to do from here is we need to display the scores. So say we picked 100 rounds, and after 100 rounds we've incremented the scores appropriately. We need to see at the end of this, at the end of the 100 rounds, who's won at the end of all this. Okay, so we're going to need to do some more else if statements. We need to get out of this for loop. So let's see. Yeah, okay, so what we're going to say is we're just going to display the scores. So we can just do system.out.printf. This is a little bit different than a print line statement. I will explain to you what it does in a minute if you don't already know. But we're going to say user score. So sorry about that. We're going to say user score %d \n. We're going to say CPU score %d \n. And then what we're going to type here after the string is we're going to type in the user score and then comma CPU score. Okay, so this printf function right here is a little bit different than the print line function that we've used up here. What it does is, you see these %ds, these are placeholders. What these variables do right here is they take the place of whatever the %d is. So %d will be the user score, and this %d will be the CPU score. So this is going to say user score, then the actual user score, and then CPU score and the actual user score. This \n is an escape character. It goes to the next line. So instead of doing a print line statement and doing 2 print line statements, I can just do a \n, and this user score and CPU score will be on separate lines, and it'll just look a lot better in my opinion. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to evaluate these scores, the CPU and the score and the user score, at the end of all these rounds. So we can just say if CPU score is greater than user score, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a print line function, and we're going to say CPU1. So let me just copy this. So copy, and we're just going to say paste it here, and we're just going to say CPU1. So CPU1, and then we're going to do an else if statement, else if, we're going to paste this here. Oh yeah, else if CPU score is less than user score, what we're going to do is we're just going to paste this in here, and we're going to say U1, and then else. So if the CPU score is not greater than or less than the user score, if they are equal, what we're going to do is we're going to say it was a tie. So we're just going to paste this and say it was a tie. It was a tie. And that should be it. So let's run this program and see what it does. So it's going to say how many rounds. We'll say 1,000. And as you can see, user score is 428, CPU score is 415, and it says you won. So that is a quick tutorial on how you create a dice program in Java. And if you learned something, I would appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed.